Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome back to the History AI podcast. I'm Chuck, your guide to history's most intriguing tales.
And I'm Marco, here to spice up the journey with bad jokes and, occasionally, helpful commentary.
Oh, give yourself some credit, Marco. Your commentary is usually helpful, especially when I need a laugh.
Thanks, bro. So, what are we diving into today?
Today, we're taking a trip back to World War II to discuss one of the most bizarre and terrifying battles of the Pacific theater, the Battle of Ramree Island.
Oh, I've heard about this one. Isn't this the battle where soldiers fought crocodiles?
That's the legend. But it's a bit more nuanced than that. Don't worry, we'll get to the crocodiles. First though, let's set the stage. The year is 1945, and World War II is nearing its climax. The Allies are making significant progress against the Axis powers in Europe, and in the Pacific, the tide has turned in their favor. The Japanese Empire, which once seemed unstoppable, is now on the defensive, holding on to its conquests with a tightening grip. One of the critical fronts in this struggle is Southeast Asia, where British forces are working to reclaim Burma, modern-day Myanmar, from Japanese control.
Burma was a pretty big deal? Why was it so important?
Very important. Burma's location made it a crucial battleground. It was a vital link in the supply chain between British India and China, which was fighting its own long and brutal war against Japan. Securing Burma meant protecting India's borders, disrupting Japanese control over the region, and opening a pathway for supplies to reach Chinese forces.
And let's not forget the psychological factor. The Allies were looking to erase the sting of earlier defeats.
Absolutely. When Japan swept through Southeast Asia in 1941 and 1942, their victories shattered British prestige in the region. Reclaiming Burma was as much about regaining strategic control as it was about restoring morale and influence.
So, where does Ramree Island fit into all this?
Great question. Ramree Island, located off Burma's west coast, wasn't just a random piece of land. It held immense strategic value. The island's proximity to the mainland made it a key point for controlling shipping routes and securing supply lines for the Allies. It also offered the perfect location for building airstrips that could support aerial operations deeper into Burma and beyond.
And let me guess, the Japanese were already there.
Spot on. By 1945, the Japanese had fortified Ramree Island, stationing roughly 1,000 troops there. They were dug in and ready to resist any Allied attempt to take the island.
So, the British couldn't just bypass it?
Not if they wanted to keep advancing. Leaving Japanese forces on Ramree Island would have exposed Allied supply ships and troop movements to constant threats. Taking the island was necessary to maintain momentum in the Burma campaign.
And this wasn't going to be some quick beach vacation, was it?
Not at all. Ramree Island presented a unique set of challenges. The terrain was a mix of dense jungle, muddy plains, and mangrove swamps, a nightmare for any military operation. The Japanese defenders were well entrenched and had proven time and again that they were willing to fight to the death.
Sounds like the stage was set for a grueling battle.
It was. And as the British Indian Army's 26th Infantry Division began their assault, they were stepping into a fight that would be as much against the land itself as it was against the Japanese forces. The battle for Ramree Island began on January 21, 1945, with the British Indian Army's 26th Infantry Division leading the charge. Backed by naval and air support, the Allied forces initiated an amphibious landing on the island's eastern shores. They encountered stiff resistance from the Japanese defenders, who had fortified their positions and were prepared to fight to the last man.
I can't imagine those landings were easy. What kind of resistance were they facing?
Picture this: the Japanese had laid mines, dug trenches, and built machine gun nests. They used the dense jungle to their advantage, making it hard for the British troops to advance. Every inch of ground had to be earned. Despite their superior numbers, the British forces were slowed by both the well-prepared defenses and the unforgiving terrain.
And by terrain, you mean jungle full of bugs, snakes, and diseases, right?
Exactly. The island's conditions were brutal. Thick vegetation limited visibility, and the soldiers had to wade through swamps and rivers while enduring constant mosquito bites. Malaria and other tropical diseases were as much of a threat as the Japanese themselves.
Not exactly an ideal vacation spot.
Not at all. To make matters worse, the monsoon season was just ending, so the ground was waterlogged and muddy, making movement even harder. Still, the British forces pressed on, using artillery and aerial bombardment to soften Japanese positions. Slowly but steadily, they began to push the defenders westward across the island.
How long did this take?
It wasn't a quick fight. The British had to proceed cautiously, clearing out pockets of resistance as they went. After about a week of heavy fighting, they managed to force the Japanese troops to abandon their strongholds and retreat toward the western side of the island.
And this is where things start to get swampy?
That's right. The Japanese retreat took them into one of the most treacherous parts of the island, the mangrove swamps. This was their only viable escape route, but it was far from ideal. These swamps were dense, waterlogged, and teeming with danger, not just from the environment, but from the Allies, who were closing in on all sides.
So the Japanese were basically cornered?
They were. Realizing the danger, the British forces blocked the main exits from the swamps, essentially trapping the Japanese troops inside. The Allies then used a combination of artillery fire and psychological warfare, blasting messages over loudspeakers urging the Japanese to surrender.
I'm guessing the Japanese didn't take them up on that offer?
Very few did. The Japanese military code emphasized loyalty and honor, often to the point of refusing surrender. Most of the soldiers chose to stay and attempt an escape through the swamp, despite the overwhelming odds.
And this is where nature really steps into the battle.
Yes. The swamps were a nightmare. The Japanese soldiers faced exhaustion, dehydration, and disease. Many were wounded and had no access to medical care. And then there was the wildlife, mosquitoes, venomous snakes, and, most famously, the saltwater crocodiles.
Let's not gloss over the crocodiles. These aren't the cute, little ones you see in a zoo, right?
Not even close. These were saltwater crocodiles, the largest reptiles on Earth, capable of growing over 20 feet long. They're aggressive, territorial, and opportunistic hunters. The swamps of Ramree Island were their natural habitat, and they were likely agitated by the increased human activity.
Yikes! So, the Japanese were fighting the swamp, disease, hunger, and crocodiles, all while being hunted by the British.
Precisely. Reports from the time describe horrifying scenes: crocodiles attacking wounded or straggling soldiers in the dead of night, the screams echoing through the mangroves. It created an atmosphere of pure terror.
Sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It is. And here's where things get a bit murky.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. The story of the crocodiles largely comes from a British naturalist named Bruce Stanley Wright, who claimed that hundreds of Japanese soldiers were killed by crocodiles. However, there's little concrete evidence to back up that specific number.
So, it might be more myth than fact.
It's possible. Some historians argue that disease, starvation, and combat were the primary causes of death for the Japanese troops. While crocodile attacks likely happened, the idea of hundreds of soldiers being eaten may be an exaggeration.
Still though, even one crocodile is one too many when you're retreating through a swamp.
While it's hard to determine the exact number of crocodile-related deaths, we know that the swamps claimed hundreds of Japanese lives, whether from wildlife, disease, or sheer exhaustion. Of the roughly 1,000 soldiers who entered the swamps, only about 500 made it out alive, and even those survivors were in dire condition.
That's grim. But at the same time, it shows just how chaotic and unpredictable war can be.
Absolutely. The Battle of Ramree Island wasn't just a fight between two armies, it was a fight against the environment itself. It's a stark reminder that, in war, nature can often be the deadliest adversary of all. By February 17, 1945, after nearly a month of relentless fighting and grueling conditions, the British forces declared victory on Ramree Island. The Japanese had been thoroughly defeated, with most of their troops killed, captured, or missing. The Allies secured the island, marking a significant victory in the Burma campaign.
So, what did taking Ramree actually accomplish for the Allies?
A lot, strategically. Securing Ramree Island allowed the Allies to use it as a base for further operations in the region. The island's proximity to the mainland meant they could establish airstrips, which provided critical air support for the push into central Burma. It also gave the British control over the nearby port of Kayakbu, which helped stabilize supply lines and maintain pressure on Japanese forces in the region.
And what about the Japanese? What happened to the survivors?
Of the estimated 1,000 Japanese troops who were stationed on Ramree Island at the start of the battle, only about 500 made it out of the swamps alive. Those who escaped were in no condition to continue fighting. They were starving, disease-ridden, and in some cases, severely injured. Most survivors managed to regroup with other Japanese units on the mainland, but the loss of Ramree Island was a severe blow to their morale and operational strength in Burma.
It sounds like this battle wasn't just a loss of territory for the Japanese, it was a psychological hit too.
Exactly. By this point in the war, the Japanese forces were already stretched thin, and every defeat further eroded their ability to resist Allied advances. The Battle of Ramree Island was another example of how the tide had fully turned in the Allies' favor. It showed that the Japanese were no longer able to hold strategic positions against the growing might of Allied forces.
What about the crocodile story? Did that affect how people remembered the battle?
It did. The story of the crocodiles became the most infamous part of the Battle of Ramree Island, overshadowing much of the actual military history. In 1962, British naturalist Bruce Stanley Wright, who was present during the campaign, wrote about the crocodile attacks in his book Wildlife Sketches Near and Far. His account described hundreds of Japanese soldiers being devoured by crocodiles in a single night, turning the battle into the stuff of legend.
So, basically, the truth is somewhere in the middle?
Exactly. The swamps were unquestionably a nightmare for the Japanese troops, and crocodiles were likely a part of that nightmare. But the legend of hundreds of soldiers being devoured by reptiles in a single night is more likely an embellishment than a historical fact.
Still, it's a story that sticks with you. It's one of those rare moments in history where nature plays such a big role in a military campaign.
It really is. And the legacy of the Battle of Ramree Island goes beyond the crocodile legend. It's a powerful reminder of the brutal conditions of war, especially in the Pacific Theater, where soldiers had to battle not just enemy forces but also the environment.
So, what's Ramree Island like today?
That's an interesting point. Today, Ramree Island is a relatively quiet place, known more for its wildlife and natural beauty than for its wartime history. However, the battle and the infamous crocodile story remain a haunting chapter in its past.
It's wild to think about how one small island could hold such a bizarre and terrifying story.
Absolutely. The Battle of Ramree Island serves as a reminder of the unpredictability of war and the often overlooked role that nature can play in shaping the outcome of human conflicts.
And it leaves us with a question: in the battle between humans and nature, who's the real winner?
That's a question worth pondering, Marco. Nature has a way of reminding us who's really in charge. That wraps up today's episode. Thanks for joining us as we explored the Battle of Ramree Island.
And the moral of the story? If you ever find yourself in a swamp full of crocodiles, maybe don't stay too long.
Wise advice. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review. It helps the podcast grow and reach more history enthusiasts like you.
Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, hit us up on social media.
We've also got some cool new merch available. Check out the link in the show notes.
Until next time, I'm Marco.
And I'm Chuck. Stay curious, history buffs. Discover the dark, enchanting world of shadowed journeys, the tales of Jordan and Squishy. Follow Jordan, a seemingly innocent girl with a hidden power, and her loyal companion Squishy, who reincarnates into different animals after each battle. Venture into the ominous depths of the Whispering Woods as they face fierce creatures and uncover ancient secrets. Will Jordan succumb to the darkness within, or will she find the strength to forge a new destiny? Perfect for fans of dark fantasy and epic quests, this spellbinding tale will captivate and leave you pondering the fine line between hero and villain. Dive into Shadowed Journeys today. Available on Amazon now.